Hey there, I'm Ross. In this video, I'm going to show you how I do the I-cord bind off on the If It Makes You Happy cowl. So let's just jump right in. Once you finish section 2 with the ribbing, you're going to start on section 3, which is what I like to call the twist and shout bind off. Okay, so we are on our provisional cast on side, and we're going to the opposite side of the slip knot, and we're going to start unzipping the provisional cast on and catching our live stitches and putting them on our second circular needle. So we're just going to start unzipping, and you can either pick up your stitches right when you unzip, which I find is easier than waiting till the end because you might lose a stitch. I'm going to do it one at a time just to make it easy on ourselves. And I do find it a little bit easier to go into the stitch before unzipping. That way you make sure that you get that stitch on your needles before it just falls away. So if you can just pull up the chain that's attached to the fabric and the thread, this thread and the chain at the same time. Pull them up, and that just gives a little bit extra room to grab that stitch with your needle. So you can just go in, grab that stitch, unzip, pull, grab that stitch, zip, pull, go in and grab that stitch, zip. So we're just going to do this all across the bottom of our work where the provisional cast on is. Just gonna unzip all of the provisional cast on, catching these live stitches. Okay, so we just finished unzipping our provisional cast on and putting our second circular needle through those live stitches. Now what we need to do is separate our needle tips with 70 stitches on the front and 70 stitches on the back. And we want that for both sides of our fabric, both sides of our cowl. So we have 70 stitches on one side and 70 stitches on the other. I did that for this side. Now I have to come over here and do that on this side. 5, 10. 5, 70. And I just grab that cable and pull it through. Now I have 70 stitches on both sides of my needles. We're going to grab section 2's ribbing and we're going to fold it on top of the fabric, creating this V. And then we're going to pinch in the middle and pull the fabric up, causing it to fold in half, having the ribbing on top of the other ribbing. Once we have this shape, this is where we need to make sure our needle tips are both pointing in the same direction. So these needle tips need to be turned around and pointed this way. And the easiest way to do this is to pick your fabric up, point it towards you like you're going to knit, and you're just going to transfer those stitches from your left needle to your right needle. Now we need to divide your stitches. So now you know that you have 70 on the front, 70 on the back. And we're going to go back to where our section 2 ribbing is, fold it, giving it that V shape, pinching it in the middle, in the center, pulling up, folding that fabric over, and now your needle tips are pointing in the same direction. Now that we have our needle tips arranged the right way, we're going to start the bind off, and we're going to be binding off this top section of ribbing and the very back section of ribbing. So what I like to do, this is just a little tip, I pull my needle tips through right here. So the needle tips, when we're done arranging them, they're all pointed in the same direction like this. I like to pull those middle needle tips through. That way you have the cords right here and it's just easier to work the bind off. So push those two pieces, those two sections of ribbing down. And another tip for this I find that helps and makes it easier is to grab a removable stitch marker like this, or any other removable stitch marker will work, and just safety pin the two fabrics together. So I'm going to put my safety or my stitch marker through the backside of the fabric to stick it right through there, and then I'm going to stick it from the backside to the front on my very front piece section of ribbing. And this just keeps the fabric together when you're working the bind off, and also it keeps the cables out of your way when working the bind off. So that's just a great tip for this, making it a little bit easier on you so it's not as fidgety. Okay, this is where your third needle comes into play right here, and we're going to start our bind off by casting on 3 stitches onto our back needle. So on our back needle, we're cable casting on 3 stitches. And to cable cast on, we're going to insert our needle from front to back in between the first 2 stitches on the back needle. So I have it right in between these stitches. I'm going to pull that broken yarn, I'm going to pull that tail end a little bit tight and hold it back over here against the fabric so it's tight. And then I'm going to add in my contrast color for the bind off, or my bind off color. So working the cable cast on, we're going to cast on 3 stitches. 1, going in between those 2 stitches, 2, and 3. Once you've cast on the 3 stitches for the back needle, we're going to knit 2, and then this is where it can get a little bit tricky, and that's why we use this safety pin or the removable stitch marker to kind of clasp the fabric together. We're going to insert our needle into the first stitch of the front needle as if to knit through the back loop. So we're coming in from the side and inserting and going in to the back as if to knit through the back loop. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do the same thing for the back 2 stitches. So we're going to insert our needle into the sides right here, and we're going to push our needle through to the back in both of those stitches, and then we're going to wrap our yarn, and we're going to pull that yarn through those first 2 back stitches, pull it off the needle, and we're going to pull that yarn through the first stitch on our front needle and pull that off of our first needle. And that's our first bind off. And we're going to slip these 3 stitches that are on our right hand needle to our left hand needle. Okay, so we're going to knit the first 2 stitches. We're going to insert our needle into the first stitch of our front needle as if to knit through the back loop, and insert our needle into the first 2 stitches on our back needle as if to knit through the back loop. And then we're going to wrap our yarn and knit those 3 stitches together through the back loop. Slip those off our needles, give it a little tug, and slip our 3 stitches back to our left hand needle. Okay, so we just finished the I-cord bind off on the right side, and we have our 3 stitches on our right hand needle, and we're going to pass them back over. We're going to slip them back over to our back needle. So slip them to our back needle like we've been doing for this I cord. Slip them back to your back needle and pull your cord all the way through. This is where the magic happens, okay? We're going to turn the work towards us with the needles facing us, and we're going to flip the I cord over, exposing the back side. So flipping the fabric inside out. And we're going to start our I cord. And we're going to just continue that I cord that we've been doing, but we're doing it on the wrong side. So knit 2. Insert our needle into the first stitch on the front needle. Insert our needle into the first 2 stitches on our back needle as if to knit through the back loop, and knit those 3 stitches through the back loop. Pulling them off, slipping those 3 stitches back to our left hand needle. So you're just going to repeat this to the last stitch. We're back at the end of our round on the wrong side, finishing up our I cord bind off. We are on our last stitch to bind off. We're going to knit 2, and then we're going to insert our needle into that front stitch as if to knit through the back loop, and going to insert our needle into the last 2 stitches on our back needle as if to knit through the back loop. And then we're going to wrap our yarn and knit those 3 stitches together through the back loop and slide off our needles. Now we're left with our last 3 stitches, and we need to graft the end of our I cord to the beginning of our I cord. How we do this, we're going to break our yarn, leaving about 12 to 15 inches. We're going to insert our darning needle into the back leg of the first stitch on our needles, on our left needle. Insert the back leg, pull through, and let that stitch fall off your needle. Now we're going to go over and find the first V at the beginning of our I cord and insert our needle into that V right there. So insert our needle into that first V, pull it through, and now we're going to go back over to the end of our I cord, and we're going to go back, we're going to insert our needle from the top, and we're going to go right back down that first stitch that we took off our needle. So pull it right through there and give it a little tug. Now we're going to go into the back leg of our second stitch on our needle, pull it through, and drop that stitch right off. We're going to go back over to our beginning of our I cord, and we're going to go into the next V of our I cord. Right there. We're going to pull our yarn through, and we're going to go back over to the right side and go back down that stitch that we just took off our needle. So going back down that stitch, and then we're going to insert our darning needle in the back leg of our last stitch, pulling the yarn through and dropping that stitch off, going over to the beginning of our I cord and finding that very last V. Just right there. Right there. So we're going to go into that V. Pulling our yarn through, and then going back down that stitch that we slid off our needle. Just going back down that stitch. And now we've grafted our I cord, the beginning and the end together. You can go back through and tighten your stitches up if you need to, or you can go back through and loosen them up if it looks better that way. That way it just mimics the rest of your I-cord. I like that. I like the way that looks. Maybe tighten this one up a little bit. Give it a little tug. There we go, that's good. Now you can just weave in your ends. And the way I like to do this is kind of just go back up through a couple of the legs like that. And then I like to follow the I-cord. And what I mean by that is put our needle into the I-cord and kind of just lift up those legs that are in between, making sure just to go in between the I-cord. That way it's not popping out on either side. You're just in the middle of that I-cord right there. Going underneath those legs. And I do this for a little bit. I want to make sure that my ends stay in the fabric and they don't come out. So pop my darning needle up, pull through, pull your tail a little bit tight, like that, and then just snip those ends right off and stretch it back out, and your end is now trapped in that I-cord and you won't be able to see it. Let's do the other ones as well. So I like to just grab that end, thread my tapestry needle, and just work my way into a few of these legs of the I-cord, pull it through, get it a little bit snug, and then just poke my darning needle back into the I-cord and follow the legs. Once I've gone through about 10 to 15 of those ladders, I pull it through, pull on it just a little bit, snip the end off, and give it a little bit of a tug, kind of just letting that end go back into the I-cord. Thread our tapestry needle. Snip, and then tug it again, trapping that yarn in the I-cord. It just looks so good. So now let's look at what we've done. So we finished our I-cord, we grafted our I-cord, and we woven in our ends. And this is what our finished cowl looks like. How awesome is that? Isn't that neat? I love this cowl. I love the I-cord detail on the bind off. It looks so good. You don't have to block this out unless you really want to block out the ribbing, maybe make the ribbing come out like this to where it's more uniform with the cowl. But I kind of like how it cinches in a little bit, because then it just stays snug around your neck. Well, that's a wrap on the I-cord bind off on the If It Makes You Happy cowl. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and until next time.